Do you enjoy the harvest of Missouri through food, fuel, or fiber? Interested in strengthening your community or making a difference in the lives of others? You're in the right place. This is Stand for Ag with Missouri Farmers Care. Join us for thoughtful conversations around the intersections of farmer, rancher, and consumer interests. Grab a seat, press play, and join the conversation.
Hello, welcome back to an episode of Stand for Ag. I am here with the National Central Region Vice President, Paxton Dahmer, and he is going to give us a little intro about himself. And we're going to talk about diversity in agriculture and dealing with different types of leaders.
All right. Well, thank you, Alex, for having me. First off, I'm excited to get the chance to step back in the arena with Stand for Ag in a different position. So I don't have to ask the hard questions this time. I just have to answer them. So a little bit different this time. But I'm Paxton Dahmer. I am the Central Region Vice President for the National FFA Organization this year. And so, but more importantly, I'm a past intern with Missouri Farmers Care. And so I'm a past host of Stand for Ag. Excited to get the chance to return in this way and answer those hard questions, like I mentioned earlier there, Alex. And I'm very excited for what our conversation might bring.
Yeah, awesome. So let's just, rewind back to the end of your internship last fall and kind of how has life changed for you? Give us some high points, some low points. I know that's very broad, but, this podcast was your baby. And so now that I get to carry it on, it's kind of exciting to get you back on here. And I just want to give everyone a little bit of an update.
Yeah, so my life did shift a lot. And so first off, I guess kind of the big thing is that I no longer live in Missouri. I'm no longer a student in Missouri. Like none of that happens anymore. I'm completely on the road as a national officer. And so I relocated to January after finishing out my fall term at the University of Missouri. So my life really kind of just completely flipped upside down in October for the better. But that's it's just been kind of a whirlwind ever since. And so now we did some virtual stuff to start out, but now we're pretty much on the road, living a traditional national officer life and attending events in person. I just got in actually back to Indianapolis from Nebraska this morning, and I leave the day after tomorrow for Texas. So things are quick, things are turning around, things are looking really good, and it's been an absolute blast. And but yeah, no longer a student at the University of Missouri. I'll return back in the spring of 2022 to round out my term as a college student and work towards getting that bachelor's and see whatever comes next. But for the most part, my life looks absolutely nothing like it used to.
Yeah, so I'm sure on the road you've met a lot of different kinds of people, and even on your national officer team, I know we've talked before about how there's so many different kinds of talents. So what is one thing that you've noticed, especially as a national officer, what is one thing you've noticed on how diverse the agriculture landscape is in terms of the leaders that are out there?
Yeah, well, first off, I think it's important to clarify, when we talk about diversity in agriculture, we're talking about so much more than race, religion, sex, gender, sexual orientation, identity, all of that thing, all of those things that sometimes are hard topics to bring up. Diversity is so much more than that. It's more than a surface level thing. It's about beliefs. It's about the way you were brought up, your lived experiences, and what shapes the way you think. And so we can kind of think back to this model of our experiences shape our beliefs and our beliefs shape our actions. And, if I grew up in town in the middle of Kansas City, Missouri, or St. Louis, Missouri, I'm going to have a completely different set of beliefs than if I grew up in Nevada, Missouri, like you and I both did. And that's something that's completely out of our control. But those different experiences that we've had have shaped our beliefs, which shape our actions. And that's what diversity is. And so diversity, yes, it does include, diversity of race, diversity of religion, gender, all of those different things that sometimes we're worried to bring up, but we do need to bring to the table. But diversity is much more than that. It goes much more than surface level. It's more than skin color. And so we need to start off by clarifying that. But, ag in general is very diverse. And so there are diverse agricultural practices, even within our community, Alex. You travel back home to Nevada, Missouri, Vernon County, Missouri, you've got people that are completely on the cattle side of things. You've got people that are completely row crop. You've got people that are really early adapters of things like cover crops and all those different innovative technologies that we're now seeing implemented on more of a wide scale basis. But you've also got people that are maybe a bit afraid to do that, and they're more of a traditional farmer type of person. And that's completely fine because it's based upon their experiences and their beliefs. And so as we've traveled around and as we've worked even virtually with different organizations around the state and different groups of people around the state and nation even, agriculture is very diverse, and we're seeing that. the experiences that people have when they live in California all their life and they're around vegetable production and fruit production, things like that, are completely different than what someone in Vermont or New Hampshire might have when their main thing that they really know about and they're really proud of is maple syrup. And that's completely different ballgame there, but that's what they know. And that's their agricultural product and what they see in their agricultural communities in those areas. And so that's diversity right there. It's just knowing they have different lived experiences and they bring different values to the table and beliefs to the table. That's something that's so important and something that we really need to work on in agriculture, myself included, in accepting those and reaching out for different opinions and understanding that it's just based upon their lived experiences and what they felt growing up.
You mentioned how diversity is so complex. It's this huge ideal that, really we can't ever put a name on because there's so many things that could be considered diverse. And so would you say that obviously your view on diversity has changed since we were in high school together, but how has it changed since you became a national officer? Tell me like an experience that you've had that maybe was you were just like, oh my gosh, this is really, the true meaning of diversity, not necessarily what I thought it was my whole life.
Yeah, yeah. Alex, that's a good point. I mean, when we were in high school, we grew up in a small rural community in the Midwest. And so I thought diversity was when you get a group of people together, if we look different, that's what I thought of diversity as. And that's kind of what we were taught growing up. And that's fine because we're learning, we're adapting, and our opinions have changed and our beliefs have changed. And that's something that's really important, is just understanding that people do change in what they think and based upon what they've learned. And so as a national officer, one of the moments where I really realized, like, hey, diversity is more than just what we look like and what we believe, is actually pretty recently. But we were in a board meeting and we were developing some value statements for the organization. And in that situation, we had some facilitators come in and we talked about what diversity looks like and how we can continue to strive for a more inclusive organization. And that's something that we've been working on for quite some time. And so it was really cool to see it come to fruition. But at the same time, we had some really cool conversations about it because diversity has so many layers. And so, you can take a group of people, there are going to be different opinions on what we should do as an organization moving forward. And that's diversity. Diversity of thought is something that's so important, and it's present in every single group. And so that was a moment for me where I'm like, hey, diversity is more than just the things that we see when we turn on our TV and we hear about diversity. Diversity is about opinions and thoughts and beliefs and values and the way we go about our daily lives. Alex, you and I are very different, but we're also very similar. And so it's important to understand that right there is a form of diversity. And, when we talk about diversity in agriculture, yes, agriculture constantly has to improve and become more inclusive. And just as every different industry in the United States and in the entire world needs to do that, but we also have a lot of diversity here already. So it's important to acknowledge that and recognize that and honor that and understand that, you know, if you think about diversity at its core, we have diversity. We see it every day. We might just not see it as diversity. We might see it as just, two different people. And so when we think about it through a diversity lens, that's when these things start coming to light and we start recognizing that there's already diversity in agriculture. We just have to figure out how to harness it.
Yeah. So, like you mentioned, like there's diversity present already. So how do agriculturalists honor the traditions and the diversity that's already present and still make room at the table for those people who want that seat, that want to be included, and we're working toward that. But how do you think is one of the key ways that we can honor that tradition but also embrace the change and diversity that's coming in agriculture?
Yeah. Well, I think first and foremost, we need to reflect on it, reflect on what agriculture has done recently. And so, I always look at things through an FFA lens, but just take FFA out of things, look at things, just complete agriculture, look at things the way they would have been in the early 1900s versus the way they are right now. And agricultural practices have shifted drastically. We have new technologies, we have new tractors, we have new equipment, implements. We have so many new things in agriculture that make our jobs a lot easier in agriculture. Then think of the minds that brought that to the table. Yeah, they might not look any different than you look. They might not act any different than you look, but at the same time, they are completely different than you. I promise you, they'll believe different things. They think different things, and they've lived completely different lives. And so it's important to understand that, we wouldn't be here if it weren't for diverse perspectives. But also, I think it's also important to understand that in agriculture, in order to get these new technologies in the things that we now kind of take for granted, we had to have people that weren't involved in agriculture come in and make more room at the table, like you mentioned. And so, right now we're kind of fighting a battle of how do we get more people that are, for instance, in computer science, how do we get them into agriculture? Because they're really important to our industry and in creating new technologies that are going to go into planters and tractors and combines and all of those different implements that we all use in our daily lives. We don't think about the fact that someone that maybe had absolutely no tie to agriculture other than eating their meals and wearing their clothes might have created that, might have thought about it, might have developed the software that's put into that program or in on that computer that you have sitting in your the cab of your tractor or your combine. And so there's more to it than just making more room at the table. It's also recruiting people to come sit at the table once the room is made. And so that's a big piece of it. And once they're there, you've got to make sure that you make them feel welcomed. Sometimes we find ourselves isolating people based upon different lived experiences. So I might walk into a room and it might be filled with 3 people that have grown up in agriculture and 1 person that hasn't. And it's really easy for me to go and start a conversation with those people that grew up in agriculture. And it's my internal instinct almost to go sit down and talk about those because we have so much in common. But in order to make room at the table, invite people to the table and make them feel welcome at the table, I've got to go and start a conversation with that other person that wasn't involved in agriculture as well, because they're just as important to the industry. Whether that's just acknowledging and being an educated consumer and acknowledging the fact that they are involved in agriculture in some way, shape, or form, or recruiting them to come work in the industry, because we all know that we need more people in agriculture every single day. And the agricultural landscape is continuing to shift and evolve. The organization that I get the chance to represent is continuing to shift and evolve. And that's just the way the world looks right now. And it's something that I think is a positive thing. And we have to continue thinking that it's a positive thing and understanding that it's not about taking resources away from certain groups of people to make other groups of people feel welcome. It's about creating more resources in general so that everyone can feel more welcome and everyone has a seat at that table, but also has a menu when they get there and they get to eat with the people and have those conversations and dedicate their life to agriculture if they want to, just the same as you and I have the opportunity to.
Yeah, I really like that. I think that a lot of times, especially growing up in a rural background, it's hard to um, see diversity on a broad spectrum and do what you can to create the seat at the table, but also provide them the menu kind of thing.
Mhm.
And I really appreciate that insight. If you could share some tips and tricks that you've had and encountered over the last year or in maybe in the last several years of your professional experience and even personal experiences where you have been able to use those tools to go out of your way to invite someone to the table, and how we can do that as someone who doesn't have a big platform or isn't interacting with a lot of people during the day.
Yeah, you make a good point. Like I have it really easy. It's really easy for me to talk about this because I go to events where there are diverse groups of people, and I am in a position where I get to make those conversations. But it's just that it's a conversation. And so when you step up to someone that maybe has a different set of beliefs or values or had different lived experiences than you have, it's all about making them comfortable. And people don't buy in until they feel heard. And so in that situation, find that common ground first. Don't start out with, hey, I know we're completely different, but we need to find some common ground. Start out with like, hey, tell me about yourself. What did you do growing up? And find that common ground, whether it's, you both played baseball, you both swam, or you both, went to the county fair once as a kid. Those are common ground connection points. And when you find that common ground, then you can start making real progress and understanding where they're coming from and why they believe the things that they believe. Alex, you and I have both had the opportunity to listen to Director Chris Chin in Missouri several times, and she talks about finding common ground. I forget exactly what the story is, but with someone that believed something that was completely different than what's true. It was about chicken and growing back wings, I'm pretty sure, if I can think about it. But in that situation, she talked about finding common ground with them before she can say, hey, you're wrong, actually. Chickens don't regrow their wings. And so it's not just acceptable to eat chicken wings because of that, And so, that's a perfect example right there. But if you're walking up at a conference, say you're at an AFA conference, for instance, if you're a college age student and you're going to an AFA conference or Ag Futures of America, and there are going to be people with diverse mindsets there, start out with that common ground, have a conversation with them, understand where they're coming from, what they've experienced in their lives, and how that shaped their beliefs. And then understand how their beliefs are shaping their actions. So they might be doing something that you disagree with or believe something that you disagree with. That's okay. that's perfectly fine. That's something we need to honor and embrace, because that's a diversity piece right there, is diversity of opinion, diversity of thought. And so honor that and understand that once you have that common ground, you can continue to make that connection from there. And so if we focus on all the things that we have in common rather than all the things that divide us, this nation would look completely different, and our conversations would look completely different. Our relationships would look completely different. And so as we look to bring more diversity into agriculture and make a more diverse landscape within the industry, that's something that's really important, is how can we find the common ground, focus on the common ground and the things that we have in common in our shared beliefs rather than those things that divide us.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And Director Chin, I think I have heard that story about the regrowing chicken wings. I've also heard one about the girl who took eggs on the subway. Did you ever hear that story?
I don't think I have.
So anyway, that's a story for another time, I guess. But I do appreciate you, stepping on here today and giving us some, background, and also, sharing some of your experience on the road, and also being able to put those thoughts into action, and how we can do that as people who live in rural Missouri, or people who live in Missouri in general. Is there anything else you'd like to leave with us today, before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think it's just like, it's important to give each other grace in this situation. That's what it all boils down to. You and I aren't perfect. Nobody's perfect. Nobody's going to have a perfect interaction every time they meet someone. And but give each other grace and understand that we all have. We there's reasons we believe what we believe, and some of it might not be factual evidence, and that's okay. Because there are a lot of people out there that believe things that aren't backed up by facts, and that's just the way the world works. But give each other grace for that. Understand that because we come from different backgrounds, that's going to make it strong when we work together as a team, and that's going to bring a whole new level of strength to the team, because we're going to have different perspectives and different beliefs, and we'll take all that into consideration when we're making some really important decisions. But give each other grace then. When you're in those conversations with people of different backgrounds and they believe different things, sometimes it's hard not to get defensive and say, well, I believe this, and this is why I believe it, and that's why I think it's right. There's no use in that. That's just going to divide the group. And I promise you, that's just going to do the opposite of what we're trying to do in these conversations and in these circles here. And so give each other grace, lead with grace, do everything you do in life with grace, and understand that we're all going to make mistakes. Everybody makes a mistake from time to time. And some of us make them more frequently than others, myself included. But that's okay. And that's just part of it. And, we all grow and we all learn, and understand that our beliefs might shift from time to time. And that's also okay.
Yeah, I like the beliefs may change over time thing, because if I think about you and I whenever we were in high school, and how different we are today as, young professionals and people who have joined agriculture kind of in a different realm, I think about, that's like, there's some differences there. Like we grew up together, and I would say that a majority of what we believe has changed in some way, just because of the experiences that we've lived, and that's okay for those experiences to change our beliefs. So thank you for being on here today. I really appreciate your time. And I hope that you have a great time in Texas, and you continue to make your mark on the world like we know you will. And thank you for coming and joining Stand for Ag again, but this time on the other side of the table.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate the opportunity. It's been nice to step into this realm once again and kind of reground myself with Stand for Ag. So thank you. I've appreciated it.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you for joining the Stand for Ag podcast with Missouri Farmers Care. We're excited to bring you new stories each week. We as agriculturalists have a lot of stories to tell. Stories of resilience, grit, and stories of families that are united by their passion for agriculture. Each week, tune in for a new episode and join the conversation.